Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Will. Welcome to the discussion. This is the Undocumented Filmmaking um, Creativity and Mental Health in the Face of Systemic Exclusion panel. So the first thing we want to do is we want to start by acknowledging the land that we are on. And a couple of us are in Los Angeles in Tongva land, and uh, some of us are in Durham, in Catawba land, and Shakoti land. So yeah, welcome to our panel.
Thank you, Will. And before we begin, if we can all just take a moment and check in with ourselves. We know that there's so much going on in the world right now, on these streets, in our neighborhoods, right? So if we can just take a moment to close our eyes, all the energy, all the frustrations you might be feeling, all the anxiety. You might be feeling, just all those emotions. Just do me a favor, take a deep breath and hold those emotions. And at your capacity, take a deep breath and let it out. And just acknowledge those feelings and thank them for keeping you safe. And just let them go. And when you're ready, come back.
Thank you, Mario, for leading us with that. Welcome, everyone. So we're going to tell you a little bit about the collective we're part of, Undocumented Filmmakers Collective, how it got started. And we, before we do that, we want to take a moment to honor the undocumented media makers and leaders that came before us and paved the road for us. And we really want to take a moment to remember Tam Tran, who was a filmmaker, an activist, was one of the people that has, really led the courage of, coming out as an undocumented person, risking that to give courage to all of us out there. And, she was killed in a car accident in 2010. So we just really want to take a moment to honor the work that she has done, and really her legacy lives with us this moment. Also, if we want to acknowledge the existence of this collective, Undocumented Filmmakers Collective, we can't do that without also recognizing the work that has been done before us, like Undocumedia, which has done a lot of work for undocumented media makers. It wasn't a formal organization or a collective or anything, but it was kind of a philosophy, and it really created space for undocu media makers to find community. And some of the founders, we really want to remember them: Nancy Mesa, Jesus Iniguez, Julio Salgado. And, just following their lead, Undocumented Filmmakers Collective started in 2018. And we also want to really give shout out to the folks who initially really gave us the courage and gave us ignited the fire that we had in us to make this collective what it is today. And part of it was one of our collective members, Seth Hernandez Ronquillo, along with me. We were part of a fellowship with Firelight Media, Impact Producer Fellowship, and we're at a conference, Getting Real conference, biannual conference that happens in LA. And, we were at this convening of ADOC, Asian American Documentary Network, and, the community that was there, and some of the really leading BIPOC leaders in the doc field encourage us to, really get together and build community. And so, what started as a group thread turned into a collective. Initially, it was 5 of us in 2 different cities, and now it's 30 of us in I think 5 or 6 different cities. So yeah, and Dorian, if you want to share a little bit about how we kind of came about.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, so after we had created this group thread, it really quickly turned into 30, mainly because we realized that we really needed a community to talk about some of the issues that are often in the filmmaking field, mainly for undocumented creatives. And we actually came to the realization that a lot of us just are often left out of opportunities due to a lot of the restrictions that are often made in the industry. And with this common issue, we also realized that like some of those opportunities include grants, mainly because they often ask for like a social security number, and fellowships as well. So it hinders us in a way to continue to grow as creatives. So after we started getting the ball rolling, we decided to release an open letter because there are a lot of times where a lot of our stories get taken away from us, and we're also not included in the process of creating these stories. So we thought it was important to bring these issues up. And after the open letter, it really got the ball rolling even more, and we ended up growing to this really wonderful family of like 30 amazing and really talented members. And now we're trying our best to plan for, we're dreaming big, and we really want to make sure that we open our doors as well to other undocumented creatives, as well as, because a lot of us come from various different backgrounds, and we just want to make sure that we're able to create space for all undocumented creatives.
And just to add to it a little bit, I feel like this space has also been kind of like a space for us where we can make mistakes together, we can grow together, and we want to reimagine a world that we want to create for ourselves together. And also, like, how do we cultivate a culture to learn how to not reinforce the behaviors or practices that created the systematic exclusion in the first place. So, the way we operate internally is also very horizontal, and, we do everything collectively, which is why you see we come in big groups.
Thank you, Rahi and Dorian. With that, I would like to take an opportunity for each one of us to introduce ourselves. And thank you, everybody who's watching us right now. My name is Lidieta Arevalo, and I am an immigrant from El Salvador. I came to the United States when I was 14 years old, and I've been here ever since. My pronouns are she, her, hers, ella. And I'm a multimedia producer, filmmaker, documentary, focusing on documentary for now, editor, and also a immigrant rights activist. And I'm also one of the members of the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective. So thank you for having us.
Amazing. Thank you so much. My name is Dorian Gomez. My pronouns are also she, her, hers, ella. And I was born in Mexico DF, and I am currently based in Durham, North Carolina. I do a lot of documentary filmmaking work, and I am also a freelancer. I do a lot of editing work. I have some background in music, and I want to get more into sound engineering in the near future. And I just want to do more narrative work, hopefully, in the I really want to focus on that throughout this year. Some of my recent work is I have a podcast named Nuestro South, and it talks about it's based off a book called Corazón de Dixie, or Heart Dixie, by Julie M. Wise. And a lot of that history is brought into a conversation where we talk about a lot of the Mexican immigrant experience during the Jim Crow era. And we try to correlate it with today's just immigrant experience overall, which is very different for everyone. And you can find that in all audio platforms. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Cool, awesome. I think I can go next. My name is Paulo Rain. My pronouns are he, his, him. I am based in Carson, California, but I was born in the Philippines, in Malolos, Bulacan. My dad's from the Negritos tribe in Mindanao, and my mom's from Malolos, Bulacan.
I am more of a narrative. I'm more of an actor, writer, and director, and an activist on the side. So with that being said, a lot of my work deals with narrative filmmaking, commercial filmmaking, where a lot of the topics that I usually like to write about is a lot of social political issues. I like to tackle colorism in my films, as well as like representation on screen. That's usually a lot of like my forte. That if people can see themselves represented in their screens, then they can internally and subconsciously feel that that their stories matter, that their lives matter, and their narratives matter. So I'm also part of the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective, and I believe I joined a couple months ago. I'm part of it, and been volunteering, and been really great. Coming out here and claiming and telling narratives that are usually like told.
Hey y'all, my name is Mario Torres. I am originally from Uruapan, Michoacan. I identify as a Purepecha indigenous filmmaker, currently residing in Tongvaland, more specifically Whittier, California. And some of the current work that I do includes exploring narratives in pop culture and narrative filmmaking, music videos, and just working with folks within mainstream, or trying to get different narratives in the mainstream. Also, my work includes currently working with UFC and just helping uplift our community and any folks that support us.
Hey everybody, my name is Will Prada. Pronouns are he, him. I am Peruvian. I was born in Peru. I came to the US when I was 7 years old with my mother, crossing 5 countries. I am currently in Tongvaland in Los Angeles. I am a practicing cinematographer, currently training my way up to getting more of those positions through doing grip work and gaffer work. Currently, I'm also working on a screenplay. I don't have that much experience, but I've always had the need to tell stories. I came into filmmaking through the undocumented youth movement because I realized we needed to tell our stories. This was back in like 2010. So that's how I stumbled upon filmmaking. Currently, I'm making a screenplay about I'm also like into a lot of science fiction and science, so I'm making a screenplay about like my immigrant family traveling through like wormholes and using like a Mayan codex, and I'm really excited about that project. But yeah, I'm excited to be here, and thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Will. Yeah, we're so excited to be here. And one of the main topics that we really want to tackle is really the creative and the correlation between just being a creative as well as just, oh, so sorry. Go ahead, Rahi. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. We're all navigating this Zoom life. It's, my name is Rahi Hassan. I use they, them pronouns. I guess like my go-to intro would be I am a Muslim, non-binary, multimedia creative. But, I feel like this is kind of a space that like we needed to create where I can say that I'm a Cancer moon and I'm an introvert, everyone that's smiling because I brought up astrology, I love you. I think it's so important for us to make space for these personal identities, to understand our emotional capacities and how we are affected by the world around us, so like I feel like my introversion, my being a triple water, or just being a highly sensitive person informs my work. And informs how I, you know, how I experience the world. So I was born in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and I moved to Jamaica, Queens in New York, and now I'm based in the South in Durham, North Carolina. I carved my path into documentary field through my passion for social justice, and not so much from as like a creative pursuit, which is why I actually didn't go to like a formal film school. And I also I have done DP work, editing work, but I found myself very much drawn toward impact producing work. And also, yeah, just kind of like the conversion of media storytelling and organizing. I'm currently working on a podcast about sort of like uncovering the roots of the connection between introversion and mental illness, and in an extroverted supremacist world. And also I'm working on a film about my life, which includes my undocumented journey. And it's the intention for that is to kind of eventually create a cultural dialogue around how our childhood traumas shape and sometimes guide us to become who we are. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Rahi, for sharing. And yeah, so now that everyone has introduced themselves completely, yeah, we really want to touch on a really important issue, and that is just like creativity and the correlation of it with mental health, right? And I guess a question that I have for all of you, right, is just like how does your identity, right? How does your identity manifest in your art? And another question is like, how has your art evolved as your experience of being undocumented, of just being an undocumented artist changed over time? Ame, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I can definitely most likely jump into that. I say with when you're young and when you're a kid and you don't really understand how the world works in some ways or aspects. There's so many different layers that come to you, and you have to kind of navigate it. So being undocumented, me being young, I don't think it really fazed me in the beginning. I was just like, oh, I'm just, I guess I'm documented. I'll just figure it out like when I'm like in my 20s or something. So a lot of the filmmaking that I did was mostly just to kind of just, it was just me and a group of friends, and we would just make a lot of films. And then, as I got older and as I got, more educated and I had the luxury to go to college, it was, I started learning about a lot of social, political issues that are happening around the world, the limitations that I have and many other folks have. And I began to see a lot more of a shift from my filmmaking, coming from like more of a Michael Bay background of like, oh, I want to just make cool visuals and tell pretty, like, all right stories, to more of like stories that, folks can relate to and be inspired and actually see themselves through the screen, through the lens that, usually like through an industry that was never really built for us in the first place. So I feel like with my, identity, being undocumented, I guess from the beginning it was very, I was just there just to make films, and just tell stories. And then as I progressed, a lot of my experiences started to kind of show out to a lot of films that dealt with, colorism and representation, being a first generation college student through the lens of, a Filipinx individual, and just seeing like other, challenging the representations that are shown now in media today. is what I'm focusing more on. So I feel like there has been definitely a big, I guess, impact in how it's definitely shifted from way before to like now. I don't know if anybody else has any other thing to share or anything.
Yeah, I also want to chime in onto that. Thank you, Ame, for sharing. For me, my personal experience, initially when I was like a teenage girl, I wanted to pursue a career in film, like fictional narratives. But given the many challenges and the lack of appropriate representation of undocumented individuals and even Latinos and people of color in the media, I felt the responsibility to kind of like dismantle and dismissive and false narratives. And I also felt the need to humanize the very issues that affect me and my community, and so I decided to shift gears for a little bit and focus on documentary filmmaking, because one, it is a lot more accessible. You can work with very little to no budget. And so for me, just having that immediacy of using media and storytelling and those things that I'm passionate about, using it for good and to represent my own community and to have a voice out there, I decided to go with documentary filmmaking, and I've been doing that ever since. I produced the first documentary ever that I've done in 2015. It was my thesis film for California State University, Long Beach. It's called Sin Raíz. And so since then, I've been pretty much focusing on immigration narratives. And that's kind of like how my identity has shaped, my art. But in the long run, I definitely do want to focus on more of the things that I initially wanted to do, which is more, fun stuff, comedy and fictional narratives. And but for now, this is kind of like, I feel like it's my obligation. It's part of, who I need to be for my community, and that's how I feel. And that's more or less how it has shaped, my media making. I don't know if anybody else wants to share some words on that.
I can add a little bit to that. I think in America, especially, the word identity for BIPOC folks is such a complicated and loaded word, right? Like when I was in Bangladesh, it was all brown people, right? It was it's a majority Muslim country. It's all Muslim people. And when I came to America, suddenly my identity was just very political without my choice, right? And being subjected to Islamophobia, regardless of what your relationship to your religion is, you feel like Lydia was mentioning, like, an obligation and responsibility to claim for me, like claim my Muslim identity, and so, and like being undocumented, I feel like for me, how that showed up in my work is initially, I think, was for me is like, that's the last thing I want to think about, right? Because our lives, it's so present. Being undocumented, you cannot escape it. It's present in how you're being treated, your resources, your access, what you have access to, and also like you can't really, like, I didn't come out as like undocumented, or I didn't like actually know many people that were undocumented until like much later. I was undocumented for 19 years. And so it's also like not something that I was pretty isolated in that experience. So I didn't have any courage to like tell my story as an undocumented person. So I think my art, my work is always also like trying to explore who I would be without all those labels. So one of the pieces that I had created on my 30th birthday, it's called 30. It was a multimedia installation piece that had 3 sections to it: shedding, cleansing, and celebrating. And that was sort of like a ritual that I did for myself to sort of shed, the kind of, yeah, all the things that are imposed on me, how do I shed that and how do I cleanse out of it and celebrate who I really am or who I want to be?
You just touched on some very interesting topics, Rahi. I appreciate that. And if y'all don't mind, I want to pose a question. How does privilege play a role in accessibility of resources and standard of creative production? Does anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah, I can tackle this question. I want to talk about my experience, for example, in the film industry. You know, for example, a lot of the well-funded sets I've been on, where there's Latinos, largely the folks that have access tend to be from more affluent backgrounds. And also, I think we can't deny the colorism that exists. You know, a lot of the sets I've been on, the actors are always like light-skinned Latinos, and I don't, you know, being like having a lot of indigenous blood, I haven't seen that much of people like me being represented. Even though there's a little bit piecemeal exclusion, it's not really. I feel like it's a lot of times not people with more indigenous kinds of backgrounds, you know. Also, you know, I did a trip to Peru when a couple of years ago when I had advanced parole. So I have DACA right now, and in the Obama years, you were able to travel without or you had to come up with some argument that you had to really go for a humanitarian reason or for education or for work. So I went because my grandmother was sick, and it was a cultural shock, you know, because most of the people on the streets of Lima that I see were like me, a dark-skinned person, and on the TV, I would just see like white folks of Peru, you know, and that the only place where I would see like dark-skinned folks like us on the streets, like everybody in my neighborhood in Peru, was on the news and doing like with the crimes and that kind of coverage. And I was just pretty shocked, you know, it was worse than here. So I think we can't deny this is like a symptom of white supremacy that is very prevalent and very deep in the structure of Latin America and really across the world. And that also, if you look at Univision, novelas, you know, soap operas, this is how it functions as well. And, you know, it's another face of white supremacy. It's another symptom of what what America is fighting currently, which is this thought in the system that Black lives don't matter, you know? So I think we have to strive to address the anti-Blackness in the Latin American communities and acknowledge that it's a problem. And what are we doing? You know, I know as artists, as filmmakers, our task is to create, and we're creating culture. So do we take responsibility for what we're creating? You know, are we creating a vision for a more equitable society, or are we just replicating the status quo, which is white supremacy, which is, you know, prefer light skinned folks and that. So we have to ask ourselves, I think, that if we're being active folks fighting for justice, and if we're not challenging that and seeing that, then I don't think we can claim to be, you know, folks fighting for social justice or equity. So that's what I'll say about that.
And I just want to chime in on that. Derailing a little bit from the question, but like, you know, I was mentioning earlier that my passion for documentary came from social justice, and my passion for social justice started when I was living in Dhaka, when you know, I was a child that was very disturbed and confused by just power differences all around me, which included me benefiting from colorism. Just adding on to like what Will was saying is that, you know, me being lighter skin gave me so much privilege, like lighter skin for my culture, like from being where I am from. And that privilege goes so deep, like it manifested in things like, you know, being on the front and center row of like a dance choreography or a dance performance that I did, of, you know, being selected for like a school play that I did, because like really like it was so much based on because I was like lighter skinned person. And that, you know, that like as a child, if you're not like conscious of like that is a result of like this inequalities, and how white supremacy, like, you know, is widespread all over the world, it is actually building your confidence and your self-esteem, right? Because you're not, yeah, like you're being centered and you're being getting a lot of attention. So just to point that out, you know, how that actually like, yeah, just in a smaller scale, like how that colorism played into like my privilege. Also just add to, just answer the question about how privilege plays a role in accessibility of resources and stuff. So I am probably the most privileged in, here, because I was able to adjust my status after 19 years last year. And so I've been on both sides, and it obviously, you know, like a lot of doors have opened up for me that wasn't open for me before. And one of the things I would say, more than like the systematic accessibility and resources, which we all know what that is, as a creative, it just like opened up so much mental space and creative space for me that was not accessible to me before my status adjustment.
Thank you, Rahi. I also want to chime in onto this question. I have had some personal experiences in how, you know, the lack of access to certain things, how the privilege of having, you know, this accessibility really plays a role into our, I guess, creative production, you know, quality and value. I think three things at least, and I think I can speak, you know, on behalf of myself. There's three aspects that really affect our, you know, our overall production quality and everything. So it will be, you know, legal and economical and even generational. I don't know what exactly, you know, if I should use another word, but what I mean by generational is being a first generation immigrant, a first generation college student, first generation, you know, filmmaker and professional. So, you know, just that impact of being the first at doing something that really can really, you know, present with some challenges. And in my case, I think, you know, the lack of accessibility to artistic residencies and you know, and internships that are more inclusive. And by that, I mean, you know, like, for example, I am a low income, you know, immigrant. And sometimes if I'm trying to take advantage of those resources, oftentimes I have to deal with the fact of, should I give up? You know, I have bills to pay, I have a family to maintain, I have myself to maintain, and should I take this opportunity that looks amazing, but then I cannot really afford it, you know? And sometimes I've had to say no to opportunities that will benefit me creatively speaking and will enhance my, you know, my professionalism in film. But then again, I don't really have access to that. And even if those opportunities provide some type of funding while you're in those 3 weeks, 1 month, or whatever, you know, time you need to be there to focus on your work, you have, like I said, bills to pay, things to, things that you need to take care of. And so unfortunately, because of those things, we sometimes have to say no because we don't have that capacity. And also, another thing that has personally affected me, for example, the lack of mentorship of people who are like us, who are not just POC, but also who are probably undocumented, who are in the film industry. Sometimes we feel like, oh, we're just stepping on new ground and we don't have any type of guidance in a way, whether it be in a university or whether it be in a company, in a studio. You kind of feel like you're always exploring something for the first time. And sometimes that can affect your productivity, and it can take us years to manage to do something that perhaps other more privileged individuals might get done in a shorter amount of time. And one last thing, I think the legal aspect of it, in my case, I'm privileged in the sense that I have a DACA status, so I have some type of protection, right? And with that, prior to 2017, I had the option of having an advanced parole permit, which will allow me to go outside of the country for educational, professional, or humanitarian reasons. But after that was taken down in 2017, we can no longer go abroad. And in my case, I was doing a master's program at Chapman University. In 2018, I had a scholarship, all paid expenses, to be able to produce 3 films, 3 documentaries in Australia. And unfortunately, I could not go because of the same reason, because the permit no longer existed by then. And so there's those opportunities that, unfortunately, due to our status, we're not able to acquire and take advantage of. And that obviously ends up affecting the possibilities and your potential when it comes to being creative and to practice what you studied, or to practice the profession that you like to do. So anybody else has any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. You mentioned a lot of other capacity, as well as the ability to kind of make films. There's a lot of from my experiences and from my own experiences, LA is a lot of the schools in LA, especially in high school, are based out of school to prison pipeline. So it's there's a lot of school, high schools and middle schools that that are from very economically disadvantaged communities, where not a lot of resources are allocated to those schools. And filmmaking is such a privilege, where it's sometimes you do need money to make films. You do need money to get the resources, such as a camera. So there's a lot of interesting layers into how does privilege play a role through filmmaking. Just to tie it in with what Lydia said, a lot of undocumented folks, not all, from my experiences, sometimes I have to put aside the creative capacity to actually organize, or to help out in the house, or to pay some bills, or to take a job that I do that isn't in my field, but I have to, because systemically there's a lot of oppression, where I have I have to take on those roles of taking care of my family, or paying for my brother's college tuition, or anything. And it's not just also that. I think it's also the opportunities. In the summer of 2018, I'm not going to name the production media company just for the sake of it, but in 2018 in the summer, I had the luxury and the privilege to intern at a pretty big media company here in LA. And with that, I had to go through five interviews. I had to go through 3 interviews in my college, 1 interview with another professor, the producer's assistant, and then the producer themselves that wanted to hire. They're looking for somebody to be an intern, as a physical production intern. And I'm a kid that kind of grew up in a lot of gang and gun related incidents. communities. So, you know, when I did finally get that privilege of going to that and getting that internship and working in that big production media company, you know, there's interns there that just like, I had this conversation with like this other like intern like at lunch, and he was like, oh, you had to go through 5 interviews? Like, oh, my dad knows the producer, like that's how I have this internship. And it's like what? Like I had to hop over so many hurdles just to get through that internship. And like, you know, he's there just chilling, like I'm like going back and forth, you know, working, you know, twice as hard, maybe even, I don't know, more, but and he's just there, like, you know, chilling, and he gets invited to the awesome penthouse things and everything like that. So yeah, there's a lot of privilege that kind of comes with you know, being a filmmaker and the resources that, you know, are allocated towards you and everything.
Thank you, Ame and Lydia. Those are so real, the things y'all shared. Like, it's so real. I want to ask y'all a question, but before that, I wanted to let folks that are tuning in right now that if we have time at the end, we are going to have a Q&A. You can participate in the Q&A by clicking on the chat bubble on Vimeo if you're watching from Vimeo Live. And it will ask you to either sign in as a guest or sign in with your account, and you can just post your question there. Or if you're on Facebook Live, you can message it to the live stream. Yeah, I mean, I think about like, I don't know, all of these are so real and like so challenging in so many ways. How have you all like, how has all of this affected your mental health? And have you had experienced like a mental health crisis? And like, if you did, like, how did you learn to really cope with it?
I can chime in. So I'll talk a little bit about my story as going through a deportation in my family, which is a little difficult to share. I don't often do it, but I just want folks to maybe understand what it's like, you know? So this was like 14 years ago or something that my father, you know, had a gardening business, and for a couple of years, the ICE had been after him, trying to deport him. He hadn't committed any wrongdoing, and he felt like he always had to look out, you know, when he was driving. They had actually come to our house, we found out, a couple times looking for him. This was during the Obama administration. And you know, these 5, one morning, really early, my mom, it was like 6 a.m. My mom already had left for work. She had she's house cleaning business, and suddenly these 5 cops show up at my door, ICE agents, and they're just knocking. And my dad, well, I answered it, and they were looking for him, and my dad had been living with this fear and this anxiety for I think like months or over a year. And it was just a really difficult trauma kind of moment for us. It was me, I was 21, my brother, he was 12, and we were the ones at home, and my dad. And it was just shocking to see, you know, 5 armed people at your door. And my dad was just like, I can't keep running, like I can't keep living like this. They're here, I have to go. And you know, it was a huge moment for us there. We're just crying our eyes out, not understanding why, you know, all he was doing was working, you know. And so after that, my family didn't have that financial, of course, help. And then I was still going to college, and I had to take on my dad's gardening business. And aside from that, you know, the emotional trauma, the emotional scar of like the months after that at our house, I actually like was figuring out way like escape routes out of my house and let in case they came again. So that's how my mind was working. Like, okay, look, there's like a hole on this ceiling, and in case they come again, this is how we're gonna get out. We ended up moving because of this living in fear. And then months after that, my mom, you know, taking on motherhood by herself with my 12-year-old brother, and having this being emotionally wrecked and crying on the phone all the time with my dad. And my brother, later me finding out like years later that somehow he, you know, he was 12 and he somehow blamed himself for it, and he had really deep scars and like symptoms of like PTSD type of shit. And I'm sorry, but and it was, you know, it took a long time for us to all get over it. Like I remember being in college, just having this rage inside me, not understanding, and looking at classmates with privilege. You know, I went to UCLA, where a lot of folks have a lot of privilege, and just affluent folks having the times of their lives. And, you know, for some reason they're putting this other obstacle of oppression in our lives, you know. And I was just like, I couldn't understand it. And you know, it took therapy, and it took, back then I didn't even know what anxiety and depression, like what that I was going through those things, because in our communities it's stigmatized, and there are no resources, very few resources to access mental health. So I just wanted to, you know, going back to the macro sense, I feel like, you know, currently they're traumatizing generations of children and people through these separation of families. The way I see it, it's kidnapping, you know, is these people that haven't done anything, like, and they're just working, or they're studying, and they're creating generational trauma. We already have, like, you know, legacies of colonization that have created trauma, violence, poverty. It's just another, you know, the evolution of these systems of oppression, as deportations, or as I call it, kidnapping now. And so I share this, you know, not seeking pity or sympathy, but just in the hopes that people feel empathy and understand how this creates an obstacle to our mental health sometimes. For many of us, you know, there was 2 million deportations under Obama. I'm not sure where we're at with this president now, but that's a huge portion of the population. So that when you all like work with undocumented filmmakers, that you're mindful that this may be happening, you know, these systems that affect our well-being. And then I just wanted to, you know, end on a high note that after, you know, going through all this, I'll put my bro as an example. He's gone through therapy, and now he's thriving. He's doing a NASA program, a NASA fellowship, and he's doing a Google fellowship. I'm really proud of him. And just wanted to say that we're just looking for equity. You know, we're not here to oppress other folks. We just want opportunity and fairness, justice. I know it took long, but thank you.
Yeah, I think you bring a really great point. Personally, I have not gone through any, I guess, experience with, I guess, close relatives with deportation. But at least in my experience, I think there's always been this constant fear hanging over my head, as far as especially when I'm driving, right? When I'm driving and I'm like having to take my parents somewhere, there's always this like, oh no, like, is today gonna be the day? Is today gonna be the day that like we're no longer gonna be together, right? So I think that there's always been this constant fear, and more recently, I have been able to recognize, because like when I was much younger, I had no idea what anxiety was, what depression was, what an anxiety or panic attack were. And through more research and honestly through a ton of therapy, like I have been able to, I am still working on myself, but there's still a lot of, there's a lot of trauma that as an undocumented Latina, it's just there's so much that like you're constantly having to, you're having to tackle that. But I think that aside from that, there's also this notion of just like, there's this experience where we lose people from home, and that doesn't there's a different type of hurt that comes with that, mainly because you don't get the chance to honor those people. I personally have lost to people from back home, and those hurt like shit. And yeah, and it's already so hard to navigate grief, and adding on top of that, just being undocumented makes it so hard, because like you want to be there for your family, and you want, especially like with my parents, right? Like I know that they have experienced that grief as well, and them just not being able to honor those family members that have always been there for them, and just not being able to go back to them. And it sucks, because you go back and like think about like, dang, like I didn't even there's this sort of guilt trip that comes with it, right? Of just like, dang, I should have just cherished that moment a little bit closer. Something else that I have personally experienced as far as just like a mental health crisis is really an identity crisis. And with that, I think that I sometimes like a good friend of mine usually says, ni somos ni de aquí ni de allá. We're neither from here nor from there. And sometimes I don't feel Mexican enough, and other times I just really do not feel like American at all, right? And there's such a big mix of cultures around you that you surround yourself with, and you all of a sudden become this new hybrid, right? And oftentimes like I don't fit in many boxes, I'm also not meant to fit in a lot of these boxes. So just having to recognize that has been really interesting, and that has often come with like self-sabotage, especially when I was a lot younger, and really going through a lot of really trying to figure out what was quote unquote wrong with me, or what it felt like was wrong with me. And I would often just like self-sabotage opportunities to the point that I would just feel like I was not good enough for those opportunities, or that I just couldn't, right? And yeah, I think that the ways that I've learned to cope is through a lot of therapy, lots of therapy. And like, I really find myself in a really privileged position, because I know that, and I understand that there is a very big lack of healthcare access, especially to undocumented folks, as well as much older generations of undocumented people. So.
I may add to that. I mean, if I could be honest as well, for the last couple of days, I have been experiencing breakdowns almost every single day, right? It's just with everything that's going on, it's difficult, right? And then being an activist since the day I was born, right? My existence is political, my existence is resistance, right? I really want to be out on the streets protesting, but I also have to then remember my family, who will this affect? I'm not the only person that gets affected if I end up in jail and then end up getting deported for the actions that I take, right? And so then I look at the grander scheme of things, right? Like how is the media portraying us as immigrants, right? Often movies, television, social media, right? All they want to see is this trauma porn of folks getting deported, and that's all they want to talk about. And that's not the reality of things, right? And then I go into an existential crisis of what are we leaving behind as filmmakers, right? And so how am I supposed to tell my future children, like, this is who you are, but then when they go onto the media, they see something completely different, right? And it's really difficult. So some of the ways that I've been able to cope with that is by creating, right? I will usually take on projects as a line producer, co-editor, whatever it might be, when the project really hits home for me. And that means telling a narrative that other than what the media is already showing, right? That I feel like that's one of my purposes in this life, really changing the narrative and reclaiming it, and really showing that we're not only surviving, but we're thriving, right? I don't need all these luxurious things, right? All I really need is my family, my loved ones, my community, those people that are out there. And if I can, I just want to make a quick shout out to my parents who have been there since day one. It's very difficult also in the community to be able to self-identify as an artist. As far as I know, I'm the first artist in my family. And it's such an amazing and empowering idea, right? And so if I can pass that on to the little ones, I think that, for me, that's the best way to cope with it.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you all for sharing, for being so generous with us. It's super inspiring. I get chills just listening to y'all. Thank you for your resilience and everything. And then another question that is related to the topic. How has your access to mental health resources changed your capacity to create? I don't know if Ahmed, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd actually like to challenge the question on, like, instead of, the amount of access, I think it's more of just the lack of access to mental health resources, or just resources in general. I always find myself having to put aside my art and my film, and my creativity, just so I can create the spaces for other folks that can feel like they can, have that space to create art, to make films. So I feel like it's the lack of access, especially within different communities of, the undocumented or the immigrant community. A lot of, I guess, and this is just, I think, from my own experiences, but a lot of, like, undocumented folks that have an Asian background, we're always told to be like, don't say anything, don't talk about it, don't do anything, don't be out there, don't put yourself out there, type of thing. Well, you look at the Latinx community and maybe other communities, and it's always more of like, they're embracing it, where it's like, this is part of your identity, and everything. And so it's like, I always feel like it's always with that interesting, lack of access of mental resources that has changed my capacity, where I would have to put aside, music videos I'm working on, or short films, or commercials that I'm working on, just so I could see, other folks thrive. And I think it comes from that. I think with my experiences, it comes with that survivor's guilt. It's, or that interesting way of imposter syndrome, where it's like, if I see myself thriving for some reason, but then, like, the communities that brought me up are, they're still kind of struggling in many different ways. I grew up with a lot of gang and gun related, violence around my communities, that, like, when I do kind of start progressing in a weird sense. I always feel weird about it, and it kind of brings into the question of like, we must like, I must have been very traumatized to feel like I can never leave those communities, because I always feel like I need to go back and bring the knowledge that I obtained from the experiences that I've had to try and better it for other folks. Because growing up in that chaos and that violence, which I'm not saying gangs are bad or anything like that, they're not, but it's like, growing up with that chaos and violence and not coming from a very loving place is, I always feel like I wouldn't want other folks to go through those experiences that, that I've faced. And I always feel like it's my responsibility to, even if I have to set aside a big project, that I have to, pay respects to the people that brought me up and the communities that, made me me. So I always feel like it's more of like the lack of access that changes my capacity to create projects or films. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or questions or anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree I really have to agree, because at least for me, I know that there has been moments, and I know that I mentioned before, just like this idea of like self-sabotage, but even then, like, there are times where it's like having this experience, having the experience that I have as just like being part of the undocumented experience, there with that, and adding on the just being a creative overall, and barely and still trying to figure out and navigate a lot of the emotions that tend to tag with them. Like, there are moments where it is hard for me to just wake up and just do very basic things, right? Like, just getting up is really hard sometimes, and just doing my bed sometimes is just, there's just like an emotional drainage that comes with it sometimes, that even it just hinders me from wanting to, I just don't have the capacity, and like emotionally, I just don't have the emotional capacity at times to even focus on my art. There have been moments where I have like tons and tons of projects that I know that I have to edit, or like things that I know that I want to pursue, but I just don't have the emotional or mental capacity to do that. And oftentimes in the past, I have experienced burnout, and that sucks, because it's hard to get back up, and it's hard to get out of that burnout and be in a place where you're okay to create again, because it just takes so much energy to be able to just focus on yourself, that you really have to prioritize at times. It's like, is it going to be my art, or is it going to be me, right? So yeah, I totally agree with you, Ame, as far as just like the lack of access, just having to oftentimes just like hinder my capacity to create.
And if I can add to that, it definitely has been a challenge, right? Trying to figure out my mental health. And before, I want to say this year, actually, I didn't get much mental health, and I didn't understand what it was. There's so much stigma in our community, right? You're seen as crazy if you go seek out a therapist, right? And so it was amongst my family, there was very little talk about mental health. However, we always had, now looking back at it, quote unquote healing circles. And I say that because we never sat down and we told each other, well, we're going to have a healing circle and we're going to talk about this. No, literally family would come over and we would just have some coffee and we would just talk, and we would talk and talk. And all of a sudden it's 2, 3 in the morning and we don't want to leave, because we're able to express ourselves in this manner, right? We're able just to release the things that we have deep within us, right? And so I have actually channeled that energy into my creations, right? Whenever I felt a certain type of way and I just don't know how to express that, I'll sit down and I'll just write something, I'll draw something, I'll come up with a story, right? If I have for example, at night, if I ever wake up and I have this urgency, right? I feel like within our community, or I'll just speak for myself, sometimes I'll wake up with a sense of urgency. I just need to go out, I need to do something, right? So before I would allow those energies just to take over and dictate my entire day. And so I would end up doing a lot, but I would end up doing nothing. So now that I've been able to access mental health and therapy, I've been able to channel that energy more focused, right? I have a notebook by the side of my bed. Whenever I wake up and I just feel that sense of urgency, I'll just take a deep breath and start writing, you know? And that's really what has allowed me to maintain myself grounded and to maintain my sanity when life is not sane.
Thank you for sharing, Mario. Oh, you wanted to go, right?
I just want to take a moment to kind of like acknowledge all of y'all. Like, it's not easy to share all these experiences, especially in public, right? And it takes a lot of courage. And yeah, and I think like just, you know, one of the things I think about a lot is like the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. And knowing that this country is constantly like leaving folks under fear, that just like makes you feel that like you're not loved and you don't belong here. And all of these experiences, at least for me, like sometimes like took away my resilience and my strength because I felt small and weak. And so when I had other challenges in my life, which I, you know, did, of course, and I wasn't able to, you know, find the resilience to fight those. And just to bring up that, like, since this collective started, this is like the only space where I have a community of undocumented folks who are creatives, and you know, maybe like some of us like we relate in like having chronic anxiety and chronic depression, right? And so like, so also just for this panel, I feel like it's you know, like this space is for us to just release and create that space to talk about how creativity has been affecting us in, I mean, mental health has been affecting us in creating, and there isn't space for that in the field either, right? Like, we don't talk about that in the doc field. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And yeah.
Thank you, Rahi. And thank you everyone for sharing and being vulnerable. And I think the thing that comes into my mind now, with, you know, because everyone's experience is very different, but then similar in different ways. I wanted to tackle, like, I'm kind of curious on the overall quality, you know, of life, and, you know, how has your immigration, I guess, yeah, how has your immigration status shaped your overall quality of like life? The decisions you've made, or the decisions that you chose not to make for your creative pursuits, or even, I guess, just in your general lives. I don't know if anybody wants to hop into that question.
I can go, Rahi. Yes, thank you all for sharing, and Amit for asking that question. For me, I can summarize it, I guess, in that it has made me more like a resourceful person, and I've learned a lot of workarounds, because obviously the system and there's a lot of challenges that we have to oftentimes go around and overcome. You know, there's not a direct I guess, path in a way, you know. And in my experience, like I said before, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I knew that I wanted to pursue a career in film and study film. But at the moment, knowing that I was undocumented and I did not even have DACA status back then, I knew that I needed to move at my own pace, you know, especially because from high school to a 4-year university, to me, that was something that I could not do because of financial reasons. It was simply out of my, you know, capacity to pay for that. So I decided to go with a workaround, and I decided to take classes at a community college. I ended up doing 4 years there prior to when I transferred to a, you know, university. And in there, even though I wanted to, you know, pursue film, I also knew that in order to maintain myself, in order to support myself in a way where I can pretty much self-employ, I needed to learn some new skills, you know, because I couldn't just do film, because in my, you know, back then I didn't know anybody who was working in film, and I didn't know how to start a career in film. So what I decided to do is take classes and to do a associate's degree in graphic design, because I knew that that was something that I could combine with my love for photography, you know, and with some knowledge that I got, you know, in terms of printing. And so I knew that I could do like a business on my own, you know. I could like do photography, graphic design, printing services, and that way I could save some money for the future so that I could go to film school, you know, one day. And so, yeah, that took me 4 years. And then in 2013, thankfully, you know, things happening in California, the California Dream Act came out. And I was able to be one of the first, I believe I was part of the first delegation of DACA recipients and undocumented students who were able to have some financial, you know, aid to do a bachelor's. So then I transferred to California State University, Long Beach, and I did 2 years, 2 additional years to get a bachelor's in film. And so, you know, it took me 6 years total to have a bachelor's. And but overall, I think that even though back then I was like, no, you know, there were days where I was like, oh my God, I'm doing this. I don't like, you know, graphic design is awesome, but it's not my passion, you know. Even photography, it's awesome, but it's not quite what I want to do. And so I was like, you know, there were days when I was just mad at myself because I was doing the thing that, you know, I was leaving behind something that I really wanted to do. But in the long run, I think it worked out because it made me more of a resourceful person, somebody who's more well-rounded in a way. Because now that I'm actually, you know, an independent filmmaker, those skills really are helping me a lot in whether it be animation, whether it be graphic design, whether it be multimedia, whether it be video editing, whatever it is. I think those skills that I gained from that experience really help me, you know, even to get more clients. And so, you know, that's one of the things that really being undocumented kind of taught me, you know, how to look at things, change my perspective and learn new things. And I might not be a quote unquote expert in one specific field, but I can do a lot of things. And that in the long run, you know, I can survive, and not just survive, but I can thrive because of those skills that I've gained throughout my experience. So that's kind of like something that I wanted to, you know, chime in.
Yes, we are out here thriving, right? I kind of go back to the narrative that I mentioned earlier before, right? I feel like society wants to keep us oppressed, wants to see us oppressed in the media. And you know what? Life for me has not been like that. Yes, I have faced hurdles, I have faced challenges, but who hasn't, right? So I can't sit down and crawl up in a little ball and just, you know, become a victim. That's not who I am. That's not who my father and my mother raised me to be. That's not who my grandparents raised me to be, right? I have generations of ancestors who have been hardworking. And so they're the ones who have taught me that in order to provide for your family, in order to provide for yourself, you have to work hard for it, right? And it's similar to Lydia. I have since I was young, I've taken up so many gigs. So to give you a little background of how I fell into the industry, and more so the entertainment industry, when I was about 14, 15 years old, I got the opportunity to purchase some speakers. And, at that time I was using my PSP just to play music. So I would charge people to go and DJ at their parties. And then from there, I grew into I was still in high school. I started my own DJ company. I had a couple of DJs working under me. We had every single weekend booked for the entire summer. And, I was not only able to provide for myself, but at that point, I was able to help provide for my friends, for my homies, right? And so my overall quality of life is what we make it. And I've made it wonderful. I've made it loving. I've made it peaceful, right? When I was younger, I looked into brands, and I kind of started to get into like wearing the Air Jordans, and I wanted to have the newest threads. Man, for me, that's not what life is about. Life is about being happy, being present in the moment, and being able to enjoy life, right? So, with that said, that's my quality of life. That's what I choose to enjoy. Yes, I have hardships, but it's about how I take them on and the community that I have that supports me.
Go off. Yes. I'm so here for that. Yeah. And to be honest, and I relate a lot to both Lirias and Mario, where I think that for me, just like my immigration status has given me lots of plans, lots of A, B, C, D, E, so many plans to figure out what kind of path I want to take. I didn't have a lot of guidance, especially in high school, and even my guidance counselors didn't have a lot of education in just what it is what the immigrant life is and those were the times where I was finding out that I was documented, and well, first of all, I was undocumented, and then I got DACA. And even then, I just didn't know what my path was. There was a lot of students that were already applying to their colleges, and they're like, "Oh my God, I got in!" And then I was sitting here "Oh no, where am I supposed to go, right?" But even then, I ended up going to community college, and I got my associates, and then I'm even right now I'm pursuing interpreting, because I have I just feel the need to have something to back up what my passion is, which is filmmaking, and I love interpreting, but I just know that that's just not my calling. But I know that even having that skill is going to help me in the long run. And it has also allowed me to, just navigate, really recognize that I am able to do so many things, I feel like I'm constantly doing so many things at the same time, and I'm just yo, we're really out here, we're surviving, and we are in many ways the need to the resilience is real out here, and we're really I know personally that, at least for my quality of life, I also like to live in the moment, and I also go with the flow, because for me, I feel like things have just happened when they needed to happen, and that's honestly kind of my take on it.
I just want to add, I feel like maybe I don't give myself enough credit, but I feel like I feel like I lacked resilience, because mental health is so invisibilized, so when I have been suffering from, and Will was saying, I didn't even know what I was experiencing, I was anxious, I was living in fear. And this is, I mentioned before, it's not necessarily just all about being undocumented. It was, they're just people have challenges. I also want to really elevate or like bring up the topic of folks who don't feel safe at home, you know, due to domestic violence, due to domestic partner abuse and stuff like that. So you're not safe outside, you're not safe inside. It's like, you know, where are you safe? And so I think like for like, I mean, I pushed through like, damn, I made impossible possible for sure. Like, yeah, like, I mean, the amount, sometimes I look back and the amount of things, and you know, in a way, I feel like my lack of opportunities or my lack of resources, like, did make me very, very driven and ambitious. And, you know, I got so much done in my life, but, you know, I don't know, like, I feel like until, in some ways, I feel like this collective really is like, I can confidently say, like, I've been thriving, regardless whether I'm even making my film or not, like, emotionally, like, mental health wise, like, community is crucial. And it's community in the sense that folks who have shared experience, shared understanding of the world, right? You don't have to explain a lot of things. And so anyways, yeah, just wanted to like bring that up into the space that because of the invisibility, how mental health is invisibilized and not seen as, is not talked about, it's not, there aren't space for you to like, you know, like you can't take a day off from work because you're depressed or you're really suffering from anxiety, or, you know, you still have to go about your life. And like, how do you, and like, you know, also just want to say that as creatives, like everyone has different styles of creation, like what kind of environment they need to create. You know, some folks, like my mother is a poet, and, you know, she can write like, even in the midst of, or I mean, I don't know, I don't want to speak for her, but I think like I'm just impressed by how much she has created, despite, you know, holding everyone's feelings, holding all her pain and struggles. But for me, I'm not that kind of creative. Like for me, I really need to get to a better mental health space to be able to, you know, create. And so, you know, like, yeah, so my status really, like, I think, so I want to just acknowledge like my privilege of being able to adjust my status also, like, extremely played a role in that.
Thank you all for tackling that question. And I want to just ask kind of like a wrap-up question. I wanted to ask if you all can share and highlight strategies of how you've been able to thrive despite the mental health, economic challenges, and lack of opportunities.
Yeah, I can talk about it. I think, like I was saying, that when you know that, like, when you know that you can only work with this much, you figure out ways, you know? And so, and like, you know, you have to learn life hacks. You have to be, you have to know how to like move through complicated, you know, situations. Like, things are not simple when you have this like uncertainty hanging over your head, knowing that, you know, like for instance, when I was choosing my major for my college, I got a letter when I was put in removal proceeding in 2011, and that's around the time, I might be off on the year, but I had to sort of, oh yeah, I was already in college, and I was majoring in legal studies because I wanted to go into law. And once I got the removal proceeding, even though we applied for a petition, that we knew that, like, we don't know what the result is going to be. Like, it very much, like, I was very much just waiting on a deportation letter. just any moment I might have to like leave the country. And also like my family members are able to adjust their status. So I was the only one who was undocumented. And operating from that, like I had to make a decision. My dad sat me down and told me that, like, you know, if you study law and you go to Bangladesh, you can't really use the law you're learning in America in Bangladesh. So you need to think about something universal. So I ended up majoring in business, which is like so not my thing, you know. And I feel like I did very poorly in school because I didn't understand economics or finance or not interested in that, you know. But then after that, like I had this moment where I was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? And I asked myself, like, let's forget about like jobs or anything. What do I want to educate myself in? Like, what do I want to study? And I found myself majoring in philosophy. And yeah, and I think like, you know, I wanted to travel. That's one thing that I couldn't do. So, you know, I got some credit cards and I was like, you know, I'll figure out how to pay them off later and like learn about balance transfer. And I like traveled when I wanted to travel, you know, like in my mid-20s, and I traveled across the country. So yeah, I think I probably like this is a helpful space, and this collective actually like makes me reflect and say that no, I am thriving and I did well. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Thank you, Rahi. I also kind of want to mention a couple things. Well, some of the, I guess, strategies that I will share is just understand that we cannot have everything at the same time all the time. You know, we have to compromise at one point or another, especially, you know, under circumstances, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to technically achieve what what you want. So like I mentioned, sometimes if you don't have direct access to something at that specific time, maybe choose something that is somewhat related to it, you know. Eventually, if you know, you'll get to where you need to be. So that's something that I personally want to encourage people, you know, to do. And also, you know, just understanding that it will be challenging, yes, but you are not alone. You know, ground yourself and surround yourself with your, you know, with your family members or with your community. You know, find that community to support you, because, you know, obviously you're not alone. And I think that, you know, as the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective now, I think that's one of our goals, right? Connect with other creatives, connect with other filmmakers, and we are here for you. And we will continue to grow, you know, to expand, so that there is somebody, you know, that everybody knows somebody that can help them guide. You know, if you don't have a mentor, we are here for you. And so that's kind of like what I wanted to say, that you're not alone, and you know, you're somebody and you have a lot of power. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to share. Thank you.
Yes, and I just have to echo Lydia's words. You know, you are enough, you are worthy. For all those folks out there that just feel like they cannot create because of this, because of that. No. Look into your community, look into yourself, ask yourself, what are the stories that I want to tell? What are the stories that I'm willing to put in my free time? Because, you know, unfortunately or fortunately in this community, we have the access of community, right? And so within that, we're able to create so much. I've been able to produce so many projects by contacting my friends and like, hey, I have an idea. Can you help me out with this? Can you help me out with that? So with that being said, own the means of production, employ your friends, right? And if you're looking for a line producer and you're watching this, hit me up. I hit up the collective. If any position, honestly, just hit up the collective and we'll be here for you.
Dope. I'd say my take on some highlight strategies, I'd say it's a really good mentor of mine in college. She used to say, you know, don't suffer in silence. don't choose to suffer. We always go through obstacles in our lives, and suffering is sometimes, it could be a choice. So it's like, go out there and seek, as Mario said, seek what resources are there for your communities. And if there isn't any resources, then make those resources. There's always going to be somebody that wants to film, to be the cinematographer, to help you in writing, to help you with set design or costume design or makeup. And just ask people. You don't got to pay them. You could feed them, or if you do have the money, the sky's the limit. But it's choosing to take life into your own hands and working with what you have. That way, when things are presented to you, and when you do start thriving in a way of sense that you do make $1 million budget films, it's like you not only have experiences with like that have developed you and have made you grow as a person, you're most likely going to outshine other filmmakers, and other individuals. You can, and also take away that machismo of culture. Don't share your feelings, talk about it. It's cool. Yeah, I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I'll come back to it when I get a chance.
Honestly, I definitely agree of just just creating your own resources and finding them. I think for me, I really have had to do the work and just be kinder to myself and be more patient, and also not be afraid to take that space, because oftentimes I've noticed myself just make myself smaller because I didn't feel like I was enough. But guess what? I am. And so are you. And I've also needed to learn to ask questions and to really be comfortable with asking for that help. And I think that has been really life-changing. Aside from that, just surrounding yourself with people that make you happy, and surrounding yourself with people that that are willing to help out and that do show up for you. This collective has been incredibly life-changing. I'm also really thankful for the community that I do have here in Durham, and my parents have been super supportive throughout throughout just my art / music / filmmaking career, and I owe them so much. And I just find that community and really allow yourself to just open up and allow yourself to really be vulnerable and to ask those questions.
Thank you. And so how I've been able to thrive despite mental health, economic challenges. I guess the first, during my 20s, I think one of the ways that I was able to feel empowered was coming out of the shadows as undocumented. This was around 2008 until 2012, just unapologetically revealing that part of myself, telling my story, because I knew it was important. I think in the movement, we knew it was important for people to hear our reality. I remember being a teenager and feeling shame for being undocumented, and even one time being made fun of, somebody telling me, oh, you're gonna get deported, So just taking ownership of that and not feeling or losing that fear, I think we can't deny that immigration doesn't happen in a vacuum. Throughout Latin America, there's been people's movements for justice and equality that have been cut short, and precedents overthrown by U.S. intervention. And this is not just in Latin America, but all over the world. And I think we have to also acknowledge that. Also, I have to mention about 2 years ago, I made a trip to do some video work in Washington, D.C., with this whole new political regime and just the racism. I had like the worst anxiety attack on my way there, the worst I've ever had. And that really was kind of like a call to action for me to figure out how to get a handle my on my mental health. I started doing therapy. I started learning about Eastern philosophies more deeply and practicing them. I'm definitely a practitioner of meditation and advocate mindfulness. I actually want to recommend this book by Thich Nhat Hanh, True Love. We'll put it on this link on the resource list that we're going to share. But yeah, I think it happened I think I'm grateful for that experience now because it put me on a path towards really addressing all those issues, those traumas. I also want to just give a shout out to, like, for me and my brother, I think hip hop was like a huge thing that kind of, just the unapologeticness of it, the boldness of it, and also the education within hip hop. I want to just mention that. And then the other thing has been like keeping myself in my purpose and finding or deciding. I'd like to think of it like I decide my purpose, because I think I have many purposes, but one of them is cinematography, and I just feel alive when I'm on set, just figuring out lighting and the craft of the fact that it's like a mix of technical science and art as well. It definitely keeps me feeling like self-actualized and feeling like I take ownership of my work. But thank you all.
Thank you, Will. We really want to express gratitude for everyone that's listening to us right now, that's cheering for us right now. Yeah, I would say like one thing you can do for folks in our community is, be happy for us. Try we're already competing enough, and I think the cheering just really, yeah. So we're just like really grateful folks that are, creating time to listen to us right now. A couple of housekeeping. So we have, if you go to the Philadelphia Latino Film Festival website, where the description of our panel is, just below the description, you'll see there's a link to the hyperlink to Undocumented Filmmakers Collective, and that will take you to a link tree, which has all our social media, link to all our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, also the open letter that we have published, and also an editable document with mental health resources for undocumented folks. So we kind of got that started. We added some of the resources that we know, so feel free to take a look at that. But also it's a collectively generative resource. So if you know any resources around mental health for undocumented folks, please add it there. And so now we're going to move on to Q&A. We don't have a lot of time, but we're going to try to get to as many as we can. And I will read the first question that came from Julie, Charlotte Unconventional Film School. The question is, orgs that offer classes and workshops for filmmakers, in addition to keeping prices as low as possible, how can we make our stuff accessible to people like you're describing?
Accessible. And I can go ahead and answer that question. How can we make these things accessible? By letting folks know that they are there, by actually reaching out to organizations like ours. If you go ahead and, like Rahi mentioned, go ahead and follow our social media, go ahead and sign up for our newsletter. And then later on, if there's something that you would like us to share, just send us a direct message, send us an email, and then we can go ahead and amplify that voice. And that's same thing for I feel like for other resources like this. And if I can go ahead and ask the second question, and anyone feel free to chime in on this, how can allies support your work?
I'll chime in on that. I think that some of the best ways to support people's work is just sharing it around, especially if it's happening, if it's already out and it's accessible for people to watch. I think it's important to just share a lot of that work with your networks and just amplify it. And also just like ask, like, how can I help? Like, is there crowdsourcing that is happening, or just like build relationships with those in order to have a better understanding on like supporting our work.
I also want to chime in on that. I think that also by making yourself and those around you accountable, you know, in the sense that if you know of somebody who's telling stories about certain things like immigration, like, you know, being undocumented, growing up undocumented, bring undocumented filmmakers to your production, you know, to make yourself you know, accountable, that you're telling, you know, the stories with people, with creatives, you know, that can best support those narratives. So that's something that you know, I just wanted to share. And also to the previous question, just a quick point. I think also another way that you can you know, help and provide those resources to people is by having more inclusive language and inviting language, you know, like, okay, don't have, you know, the permanent residency or US citizenship questions, kind of like, okay, these opportunities open to all people regardless of status, et cetera, et cetera. So that's more inviting, you know, people will, oh, maybe I qualify, you know. So that's something that I just wanted to share. Thank you.
I'd like to also share just a quick note. It's just like, you know, like is to not give us the, I guess this is more for, I guess, employment or like, you know, future work, is to not give us the breadcrumbs of, you know, of an opportunity where it's like, oh, you know, like due to limitations, we're just going to give you, you know, X, Y, and Z. No, I feel like it's more of asking the question, like with the limitations, how can we creatively work around those obstacles and ask questions of like, you know, how can we offer you these opportunities despite limitations of employment or immigration, because there's a lot of very talented and skillful filmmakers, whether they're in documentary or narrative, that we always feel like a liability, I think, or I feel like, to use an I statement, I feel like sometimes I feel like a liability where it's like, oh, you're undocumented, cool, to the next person. And it's like, okay, but you know, I have a lot of skills and experience and background that could have definitely gave the film project a lot of flavor and sauce. So
I just want to, oh, sorry, Will, quickly add a couple of things. Yeah, I mean, I feel so, I don't know, complicated about the word inclusion also. It's like, I would say we all need to, like, the folks who are citizens and don't have, are part of the undocumented community, let's start thinking about, you know, how do we imagine the world without borders, right? And if we get that mentality and that mindset, it's all going to seem so outrageous, right? And so when you even say, like, I'm including you, there is a power dynamic there, right? You hold that power to, I mean, it's kind of like we already feel that we're included in this country. We are brought into where it's okay, you can be in this country. And that really, you know, it's very heavy to like become an artist and become a confident human being with that feeling, you know? And so I would say just like start thinking about in whatever space you are in, how can you like dismantle those structures, right? Like even if it's just I don't know, like get your friends together, get all the allies together and be like, you know, how can we hire undocumented folks, right? How can we hire them in full-time positions? Maybe the system doesn't provide that right now, but how can, like, if we think about it, we can make it happen. So, you know, and then also because it's a mental health and creativity panel, I'd just say that, like, you know, as BIPOC artists in this country, we already experience a lot of like sort of, I guess, what's the word? Like we are tokenized into like sharing our ideas, and then our ideas are just like stolen and taken and you know, give like someone else take credit for it. Speak up and always give us credit for when it's our idea, when it's our story. And as you can see, like our collective, and there's just so much work that has been done, so much talent out there. So it's not an excuse to say, you know, I couldn't find an undocumented filmmaker. So like, you know, put us in creative, yeah, like check your privilege, check your power, and how can you transfer that agency over to, and that's not just for us, that's for, I would say, like also just BIPOC media makers, right? Yeah, how do we transfer that agency over to them? And also like just one other thing, it's like, I don't know, I feel like I have been in positions that give me power, but not being acknowledged that I have that power, you know? And so like not being recognized, that, you know, like not wanting to recognize. So yeah, I don't know, those things really manifest and like affect our mental health. So just want to put that out there.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Go.
Thank you so much, Rahi. I know we had a question about like how can undocumented filmmakers that are watching this panel join us, right? And we're still trying to figure. Well, we're working on it. So please, if you're watching this and you happen to be an undocumented filmmaker, please check out the link that Rahi shared a couple of minutes ago in our description. Please check those links out. Please reach out to us, and like we will reach out to you as soon as we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Muchas gracias a los que nos están viendo también en español. Queremos darles muchas gracias por sus preguntas y quiero responder una pregunta de Reina Torres que dice, ¿qué pueden aconsejar a los jóvenes que quisieran comenzar en esta difícil pero interesante carrera? Una de las cosas que yo puedo aconsejar es que primeramente se conecten con alguien, encuentren algún amigo, alguien que conozca a alguien, porque es muy importante tener conexiones y alguien que nos pueda ser como un mentor o una guía. Entonces, no sé si alguno de mis compañeros puedan también aconsejar algo más sobre esa pregunta.
Sí, yo creo que algo que me gustaría aconsejar a todos los jóvenes que también están viendo este video, pues no pares de crear. Si quieres comenzar en esta carrera, por favor, o sea, trata de ver todo lo que tienes alrededor tuyo. Si tienes un teléfono, eso puedes usarlo como algo para comenzar tu carrera, pues también como un cineasta, ¿no? Entonces es algo que que yo podría aconsejar para ustedes.
We're just scrolling through trying to see if there are any other questions that I missed.
There's a question I can ask. What motivates you to keep creating? I think right now for me, and from my experiences, Hollywood has seemed to run out of ideas. And when I attended another panel, it was like, oh, it's an open market type of deal. So I feel like what motivates me to kind of create stories is people that would watch my stories, you know, people that watch the stories that can find some form of, you know, peace or oasis from the violence that is going around them in their lives, for where a split second they can be captured into a different dimension or reality where they feel the emotions that come through a story that I tell. I think that's what motivates me to, it's so folks that see themselves in the films that I write, or the issues that I tackle, so that they can see themselves and feel that, hey, my story, like, if I see myself, my stories are valuable, not in a savior complex way, but more of like, this is me laying a foundation for other generations of filmmakers to make films. At the end of the day, it's like, I'm not just doing it for myself. If I'm making a film and I'm writing a film and I'm directing it, I can hire the next POC or by POC cinematographer, a very, a dark-skinned actress. I can have the makeup person be somebody that's trans or LGBTQ. It's like, I think that's what motivates me to keep creating, is that I'm not just doing it for myself, it's for other people as well. My bad on the time check.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ame. Oh, did you want to chime in, Will?
Oh, no.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. We're so honored to have this platform and to be able to reach you, and just thank you so much. We're really appreciative, and like, we hope to hear from some of you in our social media. So like, please reach out to us, and if you want to say anything, like, we're here, and we're here to stay. So
just wanted to add, we couldn't get to all the questions. We're sorry we ran out of time, but yeah, reach out to us on social media and we can answer those questions.
Yeah, everybody.
all right, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe.
Thank you all.
Love you all.
Hola,
Have a great
madre.
one.